Welcome to Talking Climate with Katherine Hayhoe. Each episode, we explore how climate change is affecting the people, places, and things we love, and what we can do to make a difference. From science to solutions and stories that inspire, you're in the right place for real talk about real change. Growing up with teacher parents, we didn't have a television, but every Friday night, my mom would bring home movies from the library. Sometimes classics like The Sound of Music, but often National Geographic documentaries. The one I remember most vividly featured a young British woman living in Africa, working with chimpanzees. That was the first time I'd seen a scientist in action, and I was fascinated. Of course, it was Jane Goodall. Decades later, in 2015, I was part of a small team supporting low-income countries at the Paris climate talks. I was also speaking at many side events, and when I realized Jane Goodall was on the program for one of these events, I couldn't wait. Thanks to a kind colleague, I managed to get backstage before my talk, and there I was, meeting Jane Goodall and Sylvia Earle at the same time. It was a dream come true for my 4-year-old self. By then, Jane was 80, but slowing down was never an option. She still spent more than 300 days a year on the road speaking, teaching, and reminding us that in action, we find hope. In 2021, she published The Book of Hope, and just last year at the 2024 Starmus Festival, her energy filled the arena. My own talk was right after hers, and I closed it with one of her unforgettable quotes. Only when our clever brain and our human heart work together in harmony can we achieve our true potential. I am forever grateful I had the chance to meet her, to thank her, and to join the many thousands whose lives and work have been influenced by her. With Jane's passing, the world has lost one of its greatest advocates for people and nature. But I know that her words, her example, and her hope will continue to live on. So this week, we're talking about honoring Jane Goodall's life, Pope Leo's first climate address, and finding hope in action. Let's dive in. Not so good news. Jane Goodall passed away this Wednesday at age 91. A dedicated advocate until the very end, Jane had just finished a full slate of events at Climate Week in New York and was set to speak to a group of school children in Pasadena, California, at a tree planting initiative launched in partnership with her foundation. Jane's early research observing chimpanzees in Gombe National Park revolutionized the field of primatology. It also led her to become a passionate conservationist and humanitarian, as she understood how similar and how closely linked our own well-being is to that of nature, and how critically the future of nature depends on the choices humans make. Jane understood the role natural solutions could play in solving the climate crisis. There's a much cheaper and very age-old way of solving at least a major part of the climate crisis, she said. Protect and restore our forests. Plant trees, as trees are going to take a long time to get the full carbon capture capacity of an old forest. That's why protecting the Amazon is so important now, and the Congo Basin and forests in Indonesia and Malaysia. Presciently, in one of Jane's last interviews at Climate Week in NYC, she was asked, "How will people remember you when you're gone?" Her response was clear: as an advocate for animals and nature. She went on to describe the harms of factory farming and deforestation in terms of their impacts on animals, people, and climate. You can see one of Jane's final interviews in full with Forbes at Climate Week in NYC, linked in the show notes. Good news. This past April, the world lost another staunch advocate for people and climate, Pope Francis. When his successor, Pope Leo XIV, was appointed, many wondered whether he would make climate change a similar priority. Well, wonder no more. This week, Pope Leo hosted a conference on climate change to mark the 10th anniversary of Laudato Si', called Rising Hope for Climate Justice. The conference featured a broad range of speakers from across the Christian faith, including Filipino climate activist Yeb Sanom, environmentalist, author, and Third Act co-founder Bill McKibben, and Jessica Mormon, who is a climate scientist, president of the Evangelical Environmental Network, and a former Talking Climate guest editor. I was honored to be able to participate in this conference virtually as well. At the conference, Pope Leo gave his first major address on climate. He continued Pope Francis's emphasis on rebuking those who have chosen to deride the increasingly evident signs of climate change, to ridicule those who speak of global warming, and even to blame the poor for the very thing that affects them the most. He also emphasized the importance of individual voices to call for change, reminding everyone that citizens need to take an active role in political decision-making at national, regional, and local levels. Only then will it be possible to mitigate the damage done to the environment. Even as we lose voices like Jane Goodall and Pope Francis, they continue to inspire others to step up today. From faith leaders to scientists, activists to everyday citizens, more and more are continuing the work of building a just and livable future. What you can do. The to-do this week is simple. Be more like Jane. First, she never let the idea that I'm just one person, so there's nothing I can do, stop her. Every day, she reminded us of the impact we can have, with memorable quotes like, "You cannot get through a single day without having an impact on the world around you. What you do makes a difference, and you have to decide what kind of difference you want to make." The Jane Goodall Institute has some concrete suggestions of actions you can take. Share her story, take time to connect with nature, lead with kindness, and support one of the many organizations and efforts she did. These are the seeds she planted, from caring for nature and wildlife to acts of kindness and community engagement. Second, Jane was a relentless advocate for hope. In a 2021 interview, she shared how she worried about the future young people would inherit, but she refused to give in to despair. Jane warned people that I'm about to leave the world and leave it behind me with all the mess, whereas young people have to grow up into it. That's why they need every bit of help they can. If they succumb to the doom and gloom, which many have, then they lose hope. If you lose hope, that's the end. Because if you don't hope that there's a way out, if you don't hope that your actions can make a difference, then you sink into apathy and do nothing, she said. Hope is absolutely crucial if we're going to get through this. The best tribute we can offer is to follow her lead, act with courage, lead with kindness, and never give up hope. Thanks for listening to Talking Climate, narrated by Ann Cloud. For more resources, links, and actions you can take, check out the full newsletter at www.talkingclimate.ca. Remember to make climate part of your everyday talk. Start the conversation. You never know who you'll inspire.